saving won't make you rich. A six-figure salary won't make you rich. And flexing on Instagram definitely won't make you rich. If you want real money, then you have to play the game. In this video, I'm going to reveal the real money blueprint that they forgot to teach you. With that, let's jump in. I wanted to get started with a meme that you might have seen before. It's this meme, where it essentially says, don't believe everything you see on Instagram or really any other social media platform for that matter. Here you see a woman looking at her hands and in a Mercedes. So for most people, those are status symbols, right? The Mercedes is a very nice car, and then being able to afford a $50 manicure, however much it costs, that's also luxury of time and just luxury of taking care of yourself. But if you look at a different angle or lens, you see that it's actually an Amazon Prime Mercedes truck. It is Mercedes, as you can see here. And of course, there's nothing wrong with working, but I think the intent of at least this image here is to show off that you are very wealthy and that you do have ability to buy these luxuries, although they are typically depreciating, which we'll get into later. But from a different viewpoint, it's actually not necessarily the full story. So that goes into my very first point, which is get your money mind right, because your mentality really becomes your reality, meaning that perception becomes reality. So if you do follow these Instagram influencers or any other influencer and they post these material images, you want to make sure and just double check and think, is this really true? Could this be looked at from a different lens? Maybe they're not telling me everything. Who knows? Just make sure you check your mentality. And the reason why I say that is because wealth really starts with your mindset. That's the key. And I put this into a 4-tier pyramid where I believe physical fitness is the foundation to everything, because a healthy body leads to a healthy mind naturally. Now, I'm not saying you need to be a bodybuilder of sorts or, watch every single food or calorie that you eat, but I am saying make sure you take care of your body. Your body is similar like, a temple of sorts. Whatever you put in, you start to also manifest in your thoughts too, right? Like if you are focused on fitness to some degree. I mean, I walk, for example, and I do short cardio fitness. I don't do anything like a 35-mile run every single day. I don't do that. I am very moderate, but I do believe in taking care of my body because that also transcends and manifests in my mindset, as you can see here in this pyramid, which ultimately also improves your spiritual fitness, whatever spirituality means to you, which ultimately leads to financial fitness, which is what our goal is today. Now, I wanted to share this because I truly believe that without the foundation being physical fitness, money cannot fix the cracks above, right? Money is oftentimes, for the modern person, seen as a quick band-aid, if you will. If something's wrong, maybe you're unhappy in your life. Well, if I had $1,000, I will be happy. That is not the case, though. Talking to Fortune 500 CEOs, very powerful politicians whom you've heard in the news, and also to the millionaires that I've worked with in the past, money is not the goal. It is absolutely just a tool to get to their goal. So if you genuinely believe that you will be happy when you receive money, think again, because that's oftentimes the wrong mindset and will lead you down a road that is not necessarily akin to happiness or self-discovery. So the key points that I want to make sure I drive home to you is that if you don't have health, however health looks like to you, you will very likely not have wealth, however wealth looks like to you. Toxic surroundings also drain progress. So I want to lead you in on a little secret. Social media has this very common button that you've probably known, and it's called the unfollow button. So you can unfollow people in social media. And I think that you should relate this to real life as well. In real life, if you have people or friends or family members that you think are draining your progress, that you think are toxic to you and what you want to achieve in life, why don't you just hit the unfollow button? It's an easy, very straightforward way to build progress again and avoid people who drain it. The other thing I want to talk to you about is purpose and specifically understanding what your why is. I've spoken to many different powerful people, CEOs, millionaires, politicians, and oftentimes they failed. Now, believe it or not, failure is literally a stepping stone to success. Without failure, you cannot have success. And I asked a lot of these people, how were you able to become so successful even after debilitating failures? Some, for example, were fired from their own company that they founded by their board of investors. Some were outvoted and essentially cast out of their own political party. And others, they were about to lose everything that they had ever built, from their family, their relationship with their daughter, their spouse, but they were able to get back up on the horse and continue and actually find success down the road. Now, success means different things to different people, but for the most part, what I mean success, at least in these scenarios, is to have some sort of financial success, some sort of power success, so being able to retain, CEO position or political influential position, and also being happy with your family and your life. How are they able to do that? By knowing their why. Your why should drive every single action and every decision that you make from today all the way until you decide to retire, and then on too, continuously. How do you find your why? Well, it's easier said than done. There's a framework that a lot of the successful people that I've worked with used, and it's called Ikigai. It's from the Japanese framework, and I've used it myself. The goal is to find 4 intersections, or one intersection among 4 key themes. The first is when you write and list out things that you love. You can just list it out in this Venn diagram. Things that you are great at, things that you can actually get paid for, and things that the world needs. The ideas that you write down and that intersect between all of these 4 circles, they are the ones that you can then use and hopefully use as your why and driver for what you do and why you do things. Now, I want you to keep in mind, again, reiterating what I said, money is not the goal. It should not be the goal. Money is simply a tool to get you to freedom. However freedom looks like, freedom of time, freedom of obligation, you name it. But the point is, money is not the end-all be-all. Think of it like a sundae ice cream. A sundae ice cream has a solid foundation. And then if you put a cherry on top, which is like millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars, yeah, sure, it might taste a little bit better, but it's just okay without. And I want you to think about that too. Where you are building from right now, from today in your life. Are you happy? Are you satisfied? If you're not satisfied, you might not be ready for money yet. And I want to write this down. If you are not ready to own money, and I'm talking big amount to own money, and I'm talking really big amounts of money, then let me make sure I update my pen here. If you are not ready to own money, then money will own you. So I want you to really keep this in mind. If you are not ready to own money, then money will own you. Please keep this in mind. This is a very powerful saying, and I learned this from one of my mentors in wealth management. Because, again, if you don't physically, mentally believe that you are prepared, think about all the athletes, all of the average people that perhaps, win the lottery, and the athletes making millions of dollars each year. Well, at the end, they're actually typically worse off than what they were before they had that money. Oftentimes they go into bankruptcy, oftentimes they go into depression, unfortunately, and sometimes, unfortunately, they also go down worse paths. And that's because they were not ready to own me, because the money owned them through debt, through other large payments that they weren't able to afford. They were unhappy. Why? They weren't ready for it. You got to be ready before you start building that massive wealth. And that's why it starts with your why and your mindset. So that leads me to the next point, which is understand the money flow rules. So yes, money flow rules do exist. So let's focus on the first point here. Originally, it starts with the consumer, which is you and me, and let's say we pay about $5, and the $5 is maybe for a cup of coffee at Starbucks, and that goes on to the business owner, and then the business owner, invests that money or puts it into the profits for Starbucks, let's say. So then that ultimately flows to the investor of Starbucks, and oftentimes it's actually the investor who wins most of the time. Not all the time, especially if they're equity investors. Well, guess what? Then equity investors might actually lose money, especially if Starbucks files for bankruptcy. That's not always good. But the point is, most of the time, investors win because the money flows from the consumer and ultimately somehow some percentage ends up in the investor's pocket. So the investors really are the ones that win, not so much the consumer, which is you or me. And the investors also win when economic conditions are like the ones right now, which is we're seeing inflation. Over time, we've seen inflation kind of hover around 4.5%, somewhere there. The last few years, it was a little bit higher. But the point is, when inflation increases, the cost of consumer goods, like my eggs, like my chicken, like my rent, for example, they increase too. I don't know about you, but I've seen a big increase. And guess what? That increase in consumer goods also leads directly to increased profits for investors. So overall, investors generally win. And I can tell you this also from a quantitative numbers standpoint, where I will show you the tax code and how that also benefits investors over laborers like you and me, 9-to-5 workers. So stay tuned, because that is a pretty interesting analysis. So the key point here is the tax code favors capital and not labor, literally what I just said. So let's take a look at this image here. You might have seen this before. I think it's really telling and really powerful. So these two graphs, they're essentially the same idea. One talks about married filing jointly, one talks about an individual tax filer. I'm going to focus just on the individual for time purposes. The other thing I want to just note is these numbers here, they are illustrative, okay? They are not exact. I will show you the exact numbers in a moment, but just keep in mind that these are not correct numbers. They are just for illustrative purposes only. With that, let's jump in. What do we see? We see two columns. First, we see ordinary income. Second, we see capital gains. Ordinary income is for 9-to-5 workers or W-2 workers. So this is the person that has a job, that goes to the job, works for 8 hours a day or 9 hours a day or more, and comes back home. Capital gains is for people that invest. So for example, like stocks, like real estate. If you are into crypto, it could be crypto. The list goes on. It could be gold, right? So that's what I mean by capital gains, investing. So what do you notice between these two graphs right away? I notice two things. First, I see that capital gains just has 3 brackets. Actually, it really only has 2, because you don't even pay in this, you don't pay anything, no taxes for any profits in the first bracket. And then you pay 15% of profits and 30% of profits. That's it. The second thing I notice is that under ordinary income, there's 7 brackets? There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 brackets. Here's the other thing I noticed. Look at the bottom bracket. This says if you earn more than $510,000 as an individual, then you will be taxed as a 9-to-5 W-2 worker 37% on your income that you earn. But let's say you buy a property or real estate or crypto even, and let's say you make $510,311 gain. Guess what? You're just paying 20% on that gain. Do you notice that there is a 17 percentage point difference? A 17 percentage point difference between the marginal taxes that you pay. So the top tax rate that you pay on the same exact profit or the same exact income, if you're a 9-to-5 worker, is 37%, while this here is 20%. That's a huge difference, meaning it's massive in favor of the investor, and it's really not in favor of the 9-to-5 worker, which is unfortunate. So another thing I want to show you here in this example, again, numbers aren't accurate, but the idea persists. You do not pay anything. You do not pay a single penny of taxes if you make a profit on anything, on any investment, up to $39,375 in this example. In this example, you do not pay anything in capital gains taxes. But if you are a 9-to-5 worker and you make up to this number here, $39,375, well, guess what? You're paying 12% of your money to the federal government. So do you notice the difference here? It's 12% percentage points difference. So actually, it's really not favoring the 9-to-5 worker, the tax system. So I wanted to show this to you using these numbers. Now I'll show you the actual numbers. So this chart shows the 2025 ordinary income tax brackets. These are the actual tax brackets if you're filing single for tax purposes, head of household, married filing jointly or married filing separately, you'll see the accurate numbers here. And the same thing goes here. This here is the capital gains rates. And this here is, again, for the investor. Okay, this is for the investor. So just take a look. We actually, this here is more favorable. Oh, no, it's not. Yeah, it is. Okay, so this is, again, 3 tax brackets. We have 1, 2, 3, and then these numbers are just a little bit changed. So just make sure to check out the real tax bracket numbers, but the point stands, right? The point stands that the capital gains investor is favored in the tax code over the 9-to-5 worker. So the next thing is building your financial base. I think this is critical to understand your financial base, because before you build wealth of any kind, you want to make sure you build a moat. So I drew this castle. I hope you like it. I'm not a Picasso, but hopefully you still enjoy it. Because take a look. This castle here, this is your money fortress. It essentially protects all of the wealth that you've built over the last few years. And this water here is your moat, right? This is your emergency savings fund, which you've probably heard many times before, where you should be saving 3 to 6 months. But oftentimes people might ask, what does the 3 to 6 month actually represent? What does it stand for? Let's check it out. So in this case, we want to look at a couple of things. First, we want to look at industry. So for example, what industry are you actually in? Are you in a more stable industry like defense? So if you're working, like if you're contracted for the military, for example, maybe you don't necessarily need 6 months worth of living expenses, because oftentimes I see people asking, like, Fiona, should I be saving 3 months, or should I be saving 6 months, or should I be saving more? I mean, in the end, it really comes down to how you feel most comfortable. Okay, so I can't obviously tell you that, but I can give you examples. So again, if you're in something that's a little bit more stable, like defense, okay, maybe you don't necessarily need 6 months because defense is relatively stable. But if you're in something like, I'm trying to think here. So like financials, for example, something to do with financials or entertainment. Well, guess what? At financials and entertainment, these are industries that are pretty fickle, right? So they're pretty unstable. They go up and they go down. If that's the case, maybe you want to think about having 6 months worth of expenses, because you don't know if the industry is going to be doing well in the next couple of months or years. Maybe you're going to be laid off. Who knows? And oftentimes these are industries that go in tandem with the economy. So, and oftentimes, I wish we knew, but we oftentimes don't know what the economy is going to do at any given moment. So these are reasons why you should have 3 or 6 months worth of living expenses. Dependence. If you have kids that are like 17 years old or maybe 18 years old, maybe you don't need 6 months. Maybe it's more to 3 months. But if you have a baby or a couple of babies, well, chances are they're going to be with you for 18 plus years, and you're probably going to have to take care of them financially. So if that's the case, if they are babies, you know, or very young kids, you're probably going to want about 6 months worth of living expenses, because again, you have doctor's appointments, etc. If you have debt, so for example, if your mortgage is going to end very soon, you're not going to have that debt payment anymore. So maybe you don't need the full 6 months, so maybe it's just 3 months. But if you have student debt, car debt, etc., then you probably want 6 months worth of living expenses. Health, if you have poor health or you expect poor health, then you probably want to have about 6 months worth of living expenses. If your health historically has been good and if your family health has been okay, then maybe 3 months. Economy, if we're expecting a recession or if there's a lot of volatility or uncertainty in the economy, then maybe we want to have 6 months. Again, this really does depend on your personal preference. I can't tell you what to have. And then job stability. So oftentimes, if you are in a commission-based job like in car sales or really any type of sales, in any type of sales role, that's based on commissions. And oftentimes, or like real estate, for example, commission means that you make a certain amount of money, a percentage of money based on how much you sell. Well, guess what? Volume typically decreases in unstable economic times, right? So what that means is your let me just finish writing this. So volume decreases. So the volume of sales, I should say, decreases in unstable economic times, which means you might unfortunately be let go or fired because the company itself probably can't support your salary during volatility. So you want to make sure that you have probably 6 months worth of living expenses saved up, especially if you're in a commission-driven job that really does rely in some nature on the economy and the stock market. So, what are the true enemies of wealth? I think you could have already guessed that. We're talking credit cards. Credit cards are not your friend, okay? Here's a quick look at what we can expect with the recent credit card interest rates. The point is, they keep climbing, and they have kept climbing. This chart is as of 2019. As of late, the interest rates are at about 24%. That is extremely high. Now, I want to show you something, which is also very shocking to me at least. A quarter of Americans have few savings, and 1 in 10 have $0 saved. What does that mean? If you have $0 in savings, and then let's say you have an emergency, and I'll go through in a couple of seconds how much emergencies cost, because we sometimes don't actually quantify the cost of an emergency. So if we have $0 in savings and then we have a random emergency, well, guess what? We have to pay for that emergency somehow. And what does that mean if we don't have any savings? Well, guess what? We're taking on debt. Specifically, we're taking on credit card debt, which is not good. I'm putting a sad face here. So let's take a look at what the savings are for Americans. So 12% of Americans have $0 saved. This is not good. We do not want this, okay? We have about 27%, the majority, have less than $1,000. And then this is kind of the sweet spot here. We probably want to target having between $1,000 to $50,000. Having more than $50,000, the questions probably start becoming like, why do you have so much cash on hand? Do you really need the cash on hand? Is that still falling within your 3 to 6 months worth of living expenses? If it's outside of that range, well, then maybe can we talk about just leaving the 3 to 6 months worth of living expenses in your high yield savings account, but then taking the rest of the cash and investing it or using it to work basically and make you more money through a return on investment. I don't know the answer to that. That would be something that you, the consumer, would have to say if you do have more than $50,000 saved. So again, this is probably more on the high end. And also, we don't want to target for having so much cash in your savings account because inflation will eat away at this purchasing power, at the cash's ability to buy stuff. That's why we want to invest it and make sure it grows over time in the long run. So again, this year is kind of our target. And we only have in total 29% of people who actually match the target here. So we got some work to do. About a third of Americans have the right amount of cash saved. And of course, more have on the high end. So what are some surprise expenses that you can expect? For example, an air conditioning repair. I had an air conditioning unit fail because a lightning struck it. Believe it, like a lightning strike literally hit it, and I had to replace it. And that cost me about $5,000. So that was not a pleasant experience. And also, this was in Florida in the middle of summer, where when my air conditioner didn't work, it was literally 94 degrees in the house and humid. It was just awful. And it took the air conditioning company, this happened on a Sunday. They don't work on Sundays, so it took a couple of days for them to repair it. It was not a good time. So that can cost a lot of money and also patience. Roof repair, guess what? I also had a roof repair in my house, and that cost me about $15,000, give or take. It can be very expensive. The list goes on for homes too. Automotive failures. You can have a brake failure for $500. Alternators, timing belts. Guess what? I had to get new tires, and my new tires cost me about $1,200. That was also not pleasant, but because I had cash on hand, I was able to pay for it right out of pocket without going into debt. Emergency vet expenses. Now, I have a little dog, knock on wood. He's been doing great, but of course, I do go to the vet to make sure he's all good, and sometimes my vet bill ranges from about $200 to $1,000. So again, I have the ability to pay for that because I have, I have the savings, but if I didn't, then it would be a little bit iffy. So again, just make sure that you have the cash on hand before you go into debt for credit card debt. So the key point is that credit cards on average, they cost in terms of interest rate. So I'm going to make sure I label this. The interest rate is about 24%. And you are losing money much faster than you can actually invest if you're racking up this interest rate. Why? Because the stock market, you can only make about 10% over 50 years, and that's based on the S&P 500 stock market. So guess what? What would you rather do? Put money into the stock market while you have debt on your credit card and accruing interest? No, you want to make sure that you pay off this baby, this 24%, as fast as you possibly can. So you are essentially winning by making money because you're paying off the 24%. And normally you would only be making about 10% in the stock market each year. So pay off your credit card debt as fast as you can. Okay, next, you want to create a system for your money. The old financial script is you work first, then you spend money, and then you save. So you're putting yourself last, right? So I want you to take that in mind. The very first step after working and making money is spending the money, which is not what we want. We want to flip the script. How do we do that? Either you build a business or an income stream, or you build passive income by investing in dividend stocks, for example, or you work your 9-to-5 job, you continue doing that. Then you automatically save money up to your 3 to 6 months worth of living expenses in your emergency fund. If that's done, you invest your money. So for example, you invest immediately into your 401k or your 403b plan or anything else that you have. And then at the end, you spend your leftover money, okay? I'm not saying that you need to literally save and invest every single penny that you have, but I am saying ideally you want to save and invest between 20% to 50% or more. Now, a lot of you might be thinking, "Oh my goodness, Fiona she's going a little bit crazy because she's saying 50%." I know that's a lot, but that should be a goal that you can go toward. I normally save and invest about 70% of my gross income. That is a lot. And yes, I do certainly save and sometimes miss out on certain things in life, but I'm okay with that because my goal, my why is to make sure I can help retire my parents. I can help make sure that my family is safe. My family is the most important thing to me. So that is why I'm doing this, and I'm comfortable doing this. Some people are not, and that's perfectly fine. But most people, at least in the last few decades, say you should save and invest about 10% of your gross income. And I really don't think that's necessary. I think that's too low, especially given inflation and also given the increasing rise of healthcare costs and rent costs in the future. We need to make sure that we are ahead of this and not relying on just Social Security, for example, or some other very small pension payout. We want to make sure that we build our own fund. And that's why I'm trying to push up these numbers to 20%, up to 50% or more in saving and investing. So the key point is saving and investing should always come before you start spending. You need to put yourself in first place. You go first, and no one else is your best advocate than you. Automate your wealth building habits. Automation is like out of sight, out of mind. You never have to worry about it again. And you want to make sure you pay yourself first, right? With every single paycheck. If you leave saving to chance, you will always be broke, okay? Make sure that you create a system and you stick to it. And the best system is automating it, which goes to point number 2. So I want to show you this chart here, savings rate versus wealth accumulation, which essentially shows the personal saving as a percentage of disposable personal income. Like how much income do you have left after, making payments and all that. And believe it or not, in COVID, it was actually very high. Personal savings rates were high. Why? Because we got a lot of stimulus checks. But what's a little concerning right now is that recently it has actually kind of plummeted, right? It's gone kind of downhill, and we don't want it to go that downhill. So this chart is suggesting to me that people are actually not saving as much as they should or could, and we don't want that. We want to make sure that we save. So this is where this flow leads me to the last point, which is you want to spend smarter and you want to invest smarter, not harder. So the key here is buying assets, not liabilities. So for those of you who want a quick refresher, assets include stocks, real estate, businesses, and education, which is exactly what you're doing with this video. Liabilities include Gucci, BMW, or Mercedes, if we're going back to that first meme that we saw from Instagram. iPhones, and credit card debt. Now, I wanted to actually continue this thought process from cars because oftentimes, people spend quite a chunk of money on cars and a little bit more recurring than house purchases. So in this case, I wanted to show you from Dave Ramsey this chart from a theoretical car costing almost $50,000 after 1 minute. After 1 minute that you drive this new car from a parking lot, it almost lost $5,000, okay? Immediately, within 1 minute, you spent $5,000 in depreciating value on the car. After 1 year, that drops to $38,000. It's $10,000 decline already after 1 year. Typically, the depreciation kind of stagnates around year 2 and 3. So if you are in the market for a short-term car, you want to look at maybe something that is good quality, of course, but has been owned for about 2 to 3 years. So you don't have to take that depreciation hit. The previous owner already took the depreciation hit. So take a look. The top 5 vehicles with the highest depreciation are Maseratis. They depreciate massively, and they also aren't always the best quality, honestly. So you also have a lot of car updates that you need to do, technical repairs as well. So you see Maserati in first and third place, and then you see BMW in second and fourth place. So those two cars are notoriously known for poor tech and for also poor depreciation values, and then a Cadillac Escalade. So these are the top 5 cars with pretty high depreciation. The ones with the lowest depreciation, they are Porsches, but they're not necessarily your average person's car. So if we look at rank 3 to 5, Toyota Tacoma depreciates about 20% in 5 years of owning it. Jeep Wrangler depreciates about 20%, and Honda Civics depreciate about 20% after 5 years of owning it. So these are relatively decent cars. Another thing I wanted to show you is assets, liabilities, and net worth. So over time, the American wealth, or the assets that they've owned and their net worth, has increased, but so have their liabilities. This could suggest several things, but also to me it means that, people are trying to build their wealth through some liability. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. And you can see here financial versus non-financial assets, financial being like stocks and non-financial being mortgages. You can see that financial assets, the green, has, had a good run, but non-financial assets has actually had a massive uptick in 2019, 2020, probably through crypto as well. So the key points is assets put money in your pocket, liabilities take money out forever. If you can't buy 5, this is my rule, if you cannot buy 5, then don't buy 1. Want to multiply the price or the cost of something by 5. If you can't afford it, if you got to put it on credit card, just don't even buy it. So use this 5x rule to calculate if you should buy it or not. The most important thing is absolutely start building wealth right now when you can. And if you found this video helpful, please like and share to help others. And I would love if you subscribe to my YouTube channel. It's _MMW for more cool insights. And of course, join my newsletter for more exclusive tips. The link is in the description below. Thank you so much. Your bank accounts will thank you later. Thanks, guys.